Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Friday, February 20th, 2026. And if you work anywhere near the pharmaceutical supply chain, you are probably still feeling the aftershocks from earlier this week.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, whether you are in a warehouse out in New Jersey or sitting in a regulatory office in Berlin, we are just, 48 hours past that massive Nubino webinar on global serialization updates, and honestly, the dust has not even begun to settle.
It really hasn't. Usually these annual updates they're about incremental changes.
Right.
You get a new standard here or maybe a delayed deadline there, slight tweak to an XML format. But this week felt very different. It felt like the industry woke up to a very stark and very expensive reality.
Which is why we titled this deep dive 2026, The Year of Enforcement. I really think that captures the mood perfectly because for the last, 10 years, it feels like we have been living in the year of the pilot program.
Or the year of the grace period.
Exactly. The year of maybe we will get to it later. And that era is just over.
It is entirely over. That was the era of the polite requests from regulators. They were essentially saying, please, if it is not too much trouble, could you try to track these boxes? We would really appreciate it. And now the please has left the building entirely.
And it has been replaced by legal instruments, blocked shipments, significant fines. We are going to get into the Ethiopia updates later where we saw direct threats to revoke operating licenses. We have officially moved from a technical challenge of connecting the wires to a legal challenge of business survival.
Can your business survive the audit? That is the question now.
So our mission for today, we have a massive amount of source material to get through. We have the webinar transcripts, the slide decks from Nubino, the Q&A sessions, and the new regulatory decrees that were heavily referenced. We are going to take you on a whirlwind tour of the globe.
A very bumpy tour.
Highly bumpy. We are going to look at the U.S. supply chain first and the crisis hitting small dispensers. Then we will fly over to North Africa to contrast the absolute chaos happening right now in Egypt with the surprising technological sophistication in Ethiopia.
We also need to check in on the stabilization phase in Italy.
Yes, and the technical overhaul happening in Uzbekistan, which has a very specific token update we need to clarify. And I want to be clear for everyone listening. Whether you are a VP of Regulatory Affairs or you manage logistics for a regional distributor or you are just deeply invested in how modern medicine actually moves, the complexity of moving a simple box of medicine from point A to point B has just leveled up.
Exponentially.
Let's start with a temperature check from the webinar. One of the very first things they did was poll the audience. And remember, these are your peers, manufacturers, solution providers, wholesalers. They asked a really simple but loaded question. What is creating the biggest serialization risk for your organization right now?
The results were incredibly telling about the psychology of the market.
The clear winner was meeting new and changing regulatory deadlines, which sounds a bit generic on the surface.
Right. You might think, well, of course they're worried about deadlines. Nobody likes a deadline. But you have to look at what did not win. Connectivity did not win.
System complexity was not the top fear either.
Exactly. And roughly speaking, that tells me the engineering phase of serialization is largely solved.
We know how to do it.
We know how to serialize. We know how to generate an EPCIS file and push it through a secure gateway. The technology actually works. What keeps people up at night now is the sheer volume and the velocity of the laws changing right under their feet.
It is the anxiety of the moving target. It is waking up on a Tuesday and wondering if Azerbaijan just changed the data format overnight without telling anyone.
Precisely. It is the unknown unknowns, the regulatory volatility, and as we will discuss when we get to the Egypt section, that fear is completely justified. Governments are issuing decrees with retroactive deadlines. They're changing technical specs weeks before enforcement.
That is not an IT problem.
No, it is a business continuity risk. If you cannot ship, you cannot invoice.
Let's bring it home to the United States first, the DSCSA, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. We have been talking about this acronym for over a decade.
It feels like a demanding family member at this point.
It really does, and it has been a marathon. For the heavyweights, the massive wholesalers, and the giant pharma corps, they are largely ready. They have the budget, and they have the IT armies to throw at it.
They are compliant. But the supply chain is not just giants. There's a small problem remaining. And I mean small literally, the small dispensers.
Their deadline is looming, November 27th, 2026. This is what we call the final inch of the supply chain. And historically, it is the darkest inch regarding data visibility.
Let's define our terms for the listeners.
Yeah.
Who exactly counts as a small dispenser under the FDA? Are we talking about a kiosk in a mall?
The FDA definition is very specific. A small dispenser is a corporate entity that owns a pharmacy or a dispensing operation employing 25 or fewer licensed pharmacists or technicians.
Okay, so that is your local independent pharmacy on Main Street, maybe a specialized oncology clinic in a rural area.
Exactly. There are thousands of them across the country, and historically, they have been granted exemptions or extended timelines because, frankly, they do not have chief information officer.
They do not have IT departments at all.
Right. They have a pharmacist who is also the owner, the accountant, and the HR manager. But come November 27th, the training wheels are off completely.
So what does that actually mean for them on the ground? What is the mandatory checklist they need to hit?
It is a steep climb. If you supply them, or if you are one of them, you need four critical things. First, you need electronic EPCIS capability,
Let's unpack that acronym immediately. EPCIS.
Electronic Product Code Information Services. You can think of it as the grammar of the supply chain. It is a standardized file format that describes exactly what happened, where it happened, when it happened, and why it happened.
The key takeaway for the listener here is that the era of paper is dead. The era of the PDF invoice attached to an email is officially dead.
Because a PDF is just a digital picture of a piece of paper.
Exactly. You cannot receive a shipment of drugs and just sign a clipboard anymore. You need a digital system capable of actually ingesting a complex XML data stream.
So no more faxes.
Absolutely zero faxes. If your intake process relies on a fax machine, you are non-compliant. The government wants the raw interoperable data.
Okay, requirement number 2.
You need a GLN, a global location number.
Which is essentially a digital address, right?
Think of it like a strict GPS coordinate for your business inside the global GS1 database.
Yeah.
Without a GLM, that digital EPCIS file literally has nowhere to go.
It just bounces back.
You cannot receive the data because, digitally speaking, you do not exist. You might have a physical front door on Main Street with a nice sign, but you do not have a digital mailbox.
Okay, so I have the software to catch the file, and I have my GLN address to receive it. What about the physical workflow at the pharmacy counter?
That is step 3, 2D barcode scanning. You have to verify the physical product before you dispense it or return it. You need to physically pick up the box, find that square data matrix code on the side, and scan it.
And we are not talking about the linear UPC barcode we have used for 40 years at the grocery store.
No, this is the complex 2D square that holds the serial number, the lot number, and the expiration date.
And when I scan it just beep, and I'm good.
It goes beep, and then your system actively checks the data file you received from your wholesaler. It asks a specific question. Do I have a digital record for this exact serial number? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, you have a massive problem.
Which brings us to the fourth requirement, data retention.
The 6-year rule. You must keep all these electronic transaction records accessible for 6 years. If the FDA walks into your pharmacy 3 years from now investigating a counterfeit batch, you need to be able to pull up the digital chain of custody for a specific bottle you sold back in 2026.
This sounds like a massive operational shift for a small business that is used to just visually checking a label and handing a bag to the patient.
It is profound. And this brings us to the real operational bottleneck. The nightmare is not buying a scanner or scanning the box. The nightmare is what happens when the scan fails.
The exceptions, we call this exception handling. The source material highlighted something called the 72-hour rule, which sounds incredibly ominous.
It is a literal ticking clock. Under the DSCSA requirements, if there is a discrepancy between the physical product you are holding and the digital data you received, you have a maximum of 72 hours to resolve it with your trading partner.
Let's walk through a scenario so everyone can visualize this. It is Tuesday morning at a busy pharmacy. Patients are lined up. What does an exception look like?
Okay, scenario A. We call this data no product. Your system pings. It says you just received a digital shipment of 50 bottles of Lipitor. The delivery truck arrives, you open the plastic tote, and it is empty. No Lipitor.
In the old world, I would just cross it off the paper invoice, short pay the bill, and call the driver.
Not anymore. In the DSCSA world, you legally own that digital inventory now. You have a chain of custody record in your system saying you possess those 50 bottles of drugs. You cannot just ignore it or delete the file.
Because then my digital inventory shows drugs that don't exist physically.
Right. You have to formally reconcile that data with the wholesaler. Otherwise, you are legally on the hook for product you never touched. You technically have ghost inventory that the FDA thinks you are harboring.
That sounds annoying and tedious. But what about the reverse scenario?
Scenario B is the operational killer. Product, no data.
The truck arrives.
The truck arrives, and you pull out a box of life-saving heart medication. You have a patient literally standing at the counter waiting for a refill. But when you scan the 2D barcode on that box, your system says, I have no record of this serial number.
Can I sell it? I am holding the physical box. It looks real. I bought it from my trusted primary wholesaler.
Legally, no. You absolutely have to quarantine that product. You cannot dispense it to the patient until you receive the matching transaction information.
So now I have an angry patient. I have a box of critical meds I can touch but cannot legally sell. And I have a 72-hour clock ticking to call my wholesaler's support line and figure out why their server did not send the data to my server.
That creates a bottleneck that small pharmacies are simply not staffed to handle. They do not have a supply chain detective on payroll. The pharmacist, who should be counseling patients, has to go sit in the back room on hold with IT support.
That explains why the anxiety in that first poll was so high. It is not about buying a scanner for a few $100. It is about the hidden labor cost of fixing other people's data errors.
Exactly.
Speaking of anxiety in the US, there was another nugget in the presentation slides that I think flew a bit under the radar for the general public, but for the IT crowd listening, it is a complete bombshell.
The NDC changed.
Yes. The 12-digit curveball.
For context, the NDC is the National Drug Code. It is essentially the social security number for a specific drug product in the U.S.
Right, and currently it follows a strictly 10-digit format. The problem the FDA is facing is simple math. We are running out of 10-digit combinations. So the FDA has formally proposed expanding it to a 12-digit format, adding 2 digits. Now, to a layperson, that sounds like when the phone company adds a new area code. You just update your contacts, right? Why is this a crisis for pharma?
If only it were that simple. In the world of legacy IT systems, adding 2 digits to a database field that has been hard-coded as exactly 10 digits for 40 years is catastrophic. It is a mini Y2K event for the pharmaceutical industry.
Why is it so destructive? Just change the field length.
Because it breaks everything down the entire line. It breaks the label printing software on the packaging line because the barcode gets physically wider and might not fit on a small vial.
Oh, wow.
It breaks the database structure in the warehouse management system because the column is too narrow to accept 12 characters. It breaks the regulatory filing software used to submit data to the government. It breaks the pharmacy's dispensing software. It even breaks the insurance claim adjudication systems that pay for the drugs.
So even though this is just a proposal right now, the ripple effects are massive.
Manufacturers are already sweating. Once the final rule is issued, there will likely be a 5-year implementation window. That sounds like a long time to fix a database, but think about how long it takes to update and validate a highly regulated system in pharma.
It takes years just to write the validation plan.
The advice from the experts in the webinar was very blunt. Talk to your tech providers right now, today. Ask them, is your system natively 12-digit ready? If they say, what are you talking about? You need to start shopping for a new software provider immediately.
Future-proofing is the name of the game here, which is a perfect pivot to something a bit more abstract but equally foundational: data quality. We saw a second poll in the webinar where they asked the audience, how confident are you in your serialization data?
And the results were surprisingly optimistic, honestly. Most people said mostly confident or even fully confident.
That sounds good, though, right? We want confidence.
We do. But I want to play the cynic here, and the experts in the source material did as well. In the context of serialization, is mostly confident good enough?
If I am mostly confident the brakes on my car work, I am definitely not getting on the highway.
Exactly. Mostly confident implies what a 1 or 2% error rate. In a high-volume distribution center moving 100,000 units a day, a 1% error rate equals 1,000 stopped shipments every single day.
That is operational paralysis. That is delivery trucks physically backing up at the dock because they cannot load.
This connects directly to the concept of TCO, total cost of ownership.
Let's get into that because it was a big theme.
We are seeing a major shift in mindset for 2026. Companies are finally moving past basic compliance, which is just checking the regulatory box, and they are looking at efficiency. They're auditing their serialization systems after running them for 5 or 6 years, and they're realizing that sloppy data is costing them millions in manual labor.
Because every time an exception happens, like we talked about, a human being has to intervene.
And human intervention is slow and expensive. So the major trend right now is deep integration. Connecting the ERP system like SAP directly to the government, reporting gateways to completely remove the human element and the manual copy-paste errors.
There was a really interesting point brought up during the Q&A portion about what they called the zero error myth.
Yes, someone asked the panel what an acceptable data error rate is in today's market. The expert admitted that while people in meetings like to float statistics like a 0.5% error rate is acceptable, the stark reality is that trading partners realistically want absolutely zero errors.
Because your 0.5% error is their quarantined life-saving drug.
The pressure is incredibly high to eliminate technical glitches entirely, because every single data glitch equals a patient potentially not getting their medicine on time.
Okay, let's leave the U.S. supply chain behind and get on a plane. We are flying to North Africa. Next stop on our deep dive is Egypt.
Egypt is a fascinating, if somewhat terrifying, case study in enforcement without readiness.
The source material describes the situation over there as legally binary, but operationally incredibly messy.
That is a very polite way to frame it. As of February 1st, 2026, the regulations for imported medicines are fully in force. If you import into Egypt, you must be compliant. And for local manufacturing inside Egypt, the hard deadline is August 1st, 2026. The law is the law.
So if the law is clear, what is the actual problem?
The problem is the infrastructure, specifically the Pharma Data Hub. It is being referred to as a phantom system for several industry insiders.
A phantom system, meaning the government says upload your data to the hub and the industry says upload it to where exactly?
Essentially, yes. There's a profound lack of transparency. The Egyptian Drug Authority, the EDA, issues these firm decrees, but the actual technical specifications, the API documentation, the user guides, they're often missing entirely or released at the very last possible second.
There's a specific incident mentioned in the slides, the ghost deadline.
Yes, this caused absolute panic across the industry. On January 25th, the EDA suddenly made an announcement setting a firm deadline for January 29th to upload specific secondary packaging data.
4 days notice.
4 days, over a weekend, no less, to restructure your master data and report it to a system that barely had documentation. It created massive confusion. It is a perfect real-world example of that regulatory risk we talked about in the very first poll.
You can be 100% technically ready with your software, but you cannot prepare for a 4-day retroactive deadline.
Exactly.
So how are global companies coping with this? If I am a large European manufacturer and I desperately need to keep selling my products in Cairo, what do I actually do?
You are forced into what they call the local partner strategy. Foreign manufacturers are relying heavily on their local Egyptian distributors to do the dirty work of data upload.
Because the foreign companies cannot get into the system.
Right. They often cannot even access the Data Hub portal from outside the country or figure out how to properly register themselves as a foreign marketing authorization holder. The process is too opaque. So they just securely send the raw serial data to the local distributor and pray that the local guy uploads it correctly to the EDA.
That requires an immense amount of trust in your distributor.
It does. And more importantly, it strips you of control.
Yeah.
You as the manufacturer are legally responsible for the product compliance, but your distributor is the one actually pressing the upload button.
If they mess up the formatting, you get the fine.
It is a high-stakes game of telephone.
There was also a lot of confusion mentioned around the UIDs, the unique identifiers or actual serial numbers.
This is a classic example of regulatory ambiguity causing supply chain freezes. In almost every other market globally, the US, the EU, Brazil, the manufacturer, generates the serial number themselves using a standard GS1 algorithm. You make the number, you put it on the box, and you just tell the government what it is.
Simple and decentralized.
Egypt, however, has floated the idea that the state system must generate the UID, meaning you, the manufacturer, have to electronically ask the Egyptian government to give you the numbers, and then you download them and print them.
Everyone is currently waiting for final guidelines on whether this state generation is actually mandatory, right?
Yes. And why does that matter? Imagine you are a manufacturer, and you have already printed 500,000 boxes with your own standard GS1 serial numbers ready to ship out to Cairo next week. Then the EDA officially decrees, no, you must use our state-generated numbers.
You have to physically burn 500,000 printed cartons.
That is the financial risk hanging over everyone's head right now.
Egypt sounds incredibly stressful. Let's go a bit further south and look at Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is the stark contrast to Egypt. If Egypt is chaos and confusion, Ethiopia is the blockchain fortress.
I noticed that specifically in the webinar notes, they are actually utilizing blockchain technology for their national system.
Yes, they are. They have partnered with a US-based technology company called MVC to build a national traceability hub that is fundamentally blockchain-based. It is designed from the ground up, for absolute end-to-end tracking transparency.
And how is the actual enforcement handling there? Is it also phantom deadlines?
Strict. Very strict enforcement.
Right.
And this is the vital difference. It is transparent. They are not hiding the ball.
The source material highlighted a very specific enforcement letter that went out
The
recently.
famous 15-day letter. A major marketing authorization holder received a formal written letter from the Ethiopian Food and Drug Authority, giving them exactly 15 days to register their products correctly or face immediate fines and the revocation of their license to sell.
That is what we mean when we say 2026 has teeth.
Exactly. And Ethiopia has a very clear gatekeeper system in place. You cannot even touch the serialization system, the traceability hub, without first having full approval from something called ERIS, the Electronic Regulatory Information System.
So you have to exist legally and flawlessly in their digital master registry before you can even play in the supply chain game.
Correct. It is a hard prerequisite. If your product registration data is not perfectly clean in ERIS, you simply cannot ship into the country. Period.
What are the critical dates we need to know for the Ethiopian market?
June 26th, 2026. That is the go live for full traceability reporting. And then later in the year, December 1st, 2026, is the strict deadline for aggregation reporting.
Aggregation, let's remind the listener, that is the box within a case within a pallet data mapping, right?
Yes, it is technically the hardest part of serialization on the warehouse floor. It means your data file knows exactly which specific serialized bottle is inside which specific serialized cardboard case and which case is wrapped on which specific pallet.
It is the Russian nesting doll of supply chain data.
Precisely. And Ethiopia is not skipping steps. They want that full aggregated picture by the end of this year.
But because they have provided clear technical diagrams and unambiguous guidelines, it seems like the industry respects the Ethiopian deadline far more than the Egyptian one.
Uncertainty breeds paralysis. Clarity breeds compliance. Ethiopia has provided deep technical clarity, even if the timeline itself is very aggressive.
Let's hop back across the Mediterranean to Europe. We have had the EU FMD, the Falsified Medicines Directive, in place for quite a long time now.
7 years, actually. The European Medicine Verification Organization, EMVO, just officially celebrated its 7th anniversary. It's a highly mature system now. They verify something like 10 billion packs annually. It is considered the gold standard of a system that just quietly works in the background.
Except, of course, for the outliers. And we have a very famous one to talk about. Italy.
Italy and Greece, to be fair, were the early pioneers in tracking. Long before the EU had a master digital plan, they had the Bellino system.
You know those little sticky labels you see on Italian medicine boxes? They have multiple layers, almost like a lottery scratch-off card.
Right, they look very much like government tax stamps.
Right.
Because Italy was actually first to track meds. The EU allowed them a special derogation to be the very last to join the new standardized digital European system. But that borrowed time has finally run out.
Italy is currently in what is being called a stabilization period. This runs from February 2025 all the way to February 2027. What does stabilization actually mean in this regulatory context?
It essentially means transition without accidentally breaking the national healthcare system. The National Medicine Verification System, the NMVS, is legally established, but it is not fully operational for every single participant yet. They're running controlled pilots.
Phase 2 of that pilot is active right now, correct? Running from February to April 2026.
Yes, and this is a critical detail. They're using real sellable commercial products in this Phase 2 pilot. This is not a sandbox simulation anymore. They are actively testing the physical transition from applying those paper Bellino stickers to printing the digital 2D data matrix directly on the cartons.
So if I am a manufacturer selling into the Italian market, I have until February 2027 to completely ditch the sticker machines and go full digital print.
That is the hard drop dead date. The Bellino is permanently retiring. And for older packaging lines that have been custom built over decades specifically to apply those highly secure Italian stickers, this represents a massive mechanical retooling of the factory floor.
All right, let's head east. Central Asia, Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan is kind of a sleeper hit in the global serialization world. They have a very sophisticated tracking system, but they are in the middle of a massive architectural overhaul.
They're upgrading their system from Azal Belgizi to Xtrace 2.0.
It sounds like a routine software update on your smartphone, but it is a complete back-end database reconstruction. It brings improved security and much better processing reliability. But it came with a mountain of mandatory homework for the manufacturers.
They literally had to re-register all their products, right?
Re-register master data, update their API connection keys, and this is the highly controversial part. They had to completely change their security token protocol.
This is exactly where the source material got a bit confusing, and I want to spend a minute unpacking this because it is vital for anyone operating there. We saw a slide that said the dynamic token needs to be renewed every 3 months. But then the transcript of the expert actually speaking during the webinar mentioned 3 minutes.
Right, and we actually dug into this to get the definitive answer for the deep dive. That discrepancy highlights how volatile information can be.
What is the actual rule?
Reaching out directly to the source and the latest technical specs we can confirm it is exactly 30 days.
30 days. Okay. So not 3 months and not 3 minutes.
Exactly 30 days.
Yeah.
But regardless of the specific timer, the larger implication is what matters here. The fundamental shift is moving from a static token, which is basically a permanent password that never ever changes, to a dynamic token that expires.
Which is infinitely more secure from a cybersecurity standpoint, but operationally it is so much more demanding.
Tremendously demanding. Because every 30 days, your internal enterprise system needs to automatically shake hands with the Uzbekistan government server and successfully refresh its cryptographic credentials.
And if your system fails to do that, or a firewall blocks the handshake.
On day 31, your production line halts because you can no longer legally request serial numbers or report shipments. You are locked out.
So the takeaway is that the digital connection to Uzbekistan is now fundamentally fragile and requires active monitoring.
Highly fragile and high maintenance. You cannot just set it up in 2024 and forget about it for 5 years.
And there was also something called the 7 rule mentioned.
Yes, a seemingly small formatting change. From December 1st, 2025, serial numbers must start with the digit 7, dropping the old U prefix that everyone was used to.
Again, to an outsider, that sounds trivial.
But if your factory printer is hard-coded to always print a U as the first character, or your validation database runs a rule that rejects any Uzbekistan code that does not start with U, your company is now instantly non-compliant.
It is always the little hard-coded things that bring down a supply chain.
It is. Oh, and one more thing for Uzbekistan. They added a mandatory business place ID requirement for all manufacturing and distribution sites. They want to know exactly where inside your corporate structure the drug physically is. Not just that it is owned by Pfizer, but that it is specifically located at Pfizer Plant B inside Warehouse 4.
Amazing level of granularity. Let's pivot to a rapid-fire round. We have a lot of other emerging markets popping up on the radar. I'm going to name a country, and you give me the 2026 headline from the webinar.
Let's do it.
Jordan.
The hard deadline is January 1st, 2026. But here's the major catch. There is no central reporting system live yet. Serialization is strictly for point dispensing verification right now. Also, foreign entities cannot export directly into the market. You absolutely need a local registered partner.
Rwanda.
Phase 2 enforcement is hitting in August 2026. Secondary packaging might carry a GS1 standard 2D data matrix. They are aligning with the global standard, which is incredibly nice to see for interoperability.
South Africa.
They just recently published a comprehensive roadmap in October 2025. It is a very deliberate phased approach. Phase 1 covers batch-level tracking. Phase 2 moves to unit serialization. Phase 3, which extends out to 2030, covers full logistics and aggregation. Slow and steady, but definitely moving forward.
Algeria.
2D data matrix application becomes mandatory by 2027. The key differentiator here is that the regulatory reporting obligation sits entirely with the importer, not the original manufacturer.
So you really need to vet your importer.
Know your importer intimately, because if they fail their data uploads, you lose access to the entire market.
And finally, Azerbaijan.
The ultimate wildcard right now. Their system officially launched back in January 2024. They currently accept EU and US formatted codes, which is incredibly generous of them. But there are rumors, very strong industry rumors, of entirely new proprietary regulations coming down the pipeline in March 2026.
Which is literally next month.
Exactly. So watch that specific space very, very closely.
Okay, that was a massive amount of geography and technical specs. Let's zoom out for a second. What does this all mean collectively for the people listening today?
It means the compliance map pinned on your office wall needs a lot more push pins. But more importantly, from a business perspective, it means your project timeline strategy needs a complete overhaul.
The experts in the webinar Q&A gave some very pointed strategic advice. One thing that really stood out to me was the safe zone concept.
Absolutely. They stress that 12 to 18 months is the absolute minimum safe zone for starting a serialization project in a new market. If your team is starting a project 4 months before a go-live deadline, you are already way too late.
You are no longer implementing, you are in disaster mitigation.
Precisely.
But why does it actually take so long? A lot of executives just think, well, it's just a software patch, right?
Yes, software, yes. plus negotiating complex legal contracts with local partners, plus government registration hurdles, plus system validation, plus intensive user testing. And crucially, having an 18-month runway allows time for the inevitable mistakes.
Right, because things will break.
You will fail your first API connection test to the Egypt portal. You will have a printer calibration issue in Italy. If you have an 18-month timeline that is just a minor project hiccup, if you only have 4 months, that same printer issue is a board-level crisis.
And vendor selection seems to be getting significantly harder in this environment.
It is not just about comparing software features on a spreadsheet anymore. It is about choosing a strategic partnership. You need a vendor who inherently knows that the Uzbekistan token refreshes every 30 days and handles it automatically. You need a vendor whose regulatory team is refreshing the EDA portal in Egypt every single morning to see if new technical specs have been quietly published.
You cannot do this with a static, off-the-shelf piece of software. You need active regulatory intelligence baked into the service.
Exactly.
And the final major trend they discussed was supply chain integration.
The era of the data silo is dead. Manufacturers, contract manufacturing organizations, and third-party logistics providers must be deeply digitally integrated. In 2026, you simply cannot manage compliance by exchanging emails or downloading CSV files.
Your enterprise resource planning system needs to natively talk to their warehouse management system in real time.
If those digital pipes are not permanently connected, the data does not flow. And if the data does not flow, the drugs physically do not move off the dock.
It really feels like we are collectively trying to build a digital nervous system for the entire planet's pharmaceutical supply.
That is a really beautiful way to put it. We absolutely are. And right now we are in the highly painful growth phase where all these separate regional nerves are trying to connect to each other, and quite often they misfire.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the year of enforcement, what is the final thought you want to leave the listener with?
For me, the most fascinating underlying dynamic is the tension between globalization and localization. On one hand, we see emerging markets like Rwanda eagerly adopting universal GS1 standards, embracing a global digital language.
Right, which makes it easier for everyone.
But on the other hand, we see the U.S. proposing a localized 12-digit NDC change that breaks the existing mold. We see Uzbekistan creating its own highly specific 30-day token refresh requirements. We see Egypt demanding the right to generate its own sovereign serial numbers instead of accepting the manufacturer's global standard.
So the big question is, are we actually moving toward a unified global language of traceability, or are we inadvertently building a digital Tower of Babel?
That is exactly the question of the decade. Are we creating a seamless global safety net, or are we creating a highly fractured landscape where every single border crossing requires a custom digital translator? As countries like Ethiopia, Pioneer Blockchain, and the U.S. fundamentally changes its database math, I genuinely worry we might be trending toward the Tower of Babel.
And for the listener, managing a supply chain, that means your job description is not just compliance manager anymore. Your actual job is translation.
You are a digital translator between sovereign regulatory states.
A fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying place to end our discussion today.
It is the reality of 2026.
Check your compliance maps, everyone. Keep a very close eye on Azerbaijan as we move into next month. And if you run a small dispensing pharmacy in the U.S., go buy your 2D scanner today.
Literally right now. Do not wait until November.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.